First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Today we have an interesting topic that has been sent to us from a subscriber on YouTube. And it's basically where management tries to implement a policy that there's just not enough time to do in the course of the day. I've actually seen this a few times in my career, so I am familiar with this concern. And I also believe retired Major Luis Soto is familiar with this concern. That's why I brought him on. What's up, Soto?
How we doing, Gangi? Good morning.
I'll tell you something, Soto. I know you're familiar with a topic like this, correct?
Absolutely. We've gone through this a couple of times in my career. So very interesting topic, and I can't wait to get into it.
Now, Lou, you mind introducing yourself to our audience real quick?
Sure. Again, I'm retired major, 25 years in Department of Corrections. I am currently a professor at Rutgers University teaching under the criminal justice program. And I'm just enjoying life right now and enjoying having these chats and answering questions that are very, very important to us.
And we love having you on. The information that you provide is always on point, so thank you. Now, guys, we come back from our sponsors. We're going to talk about higher level policies that may wind up affecting Frontline's ability to do their job, just in that amount of time that needs to be done. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks, you brave men and women that work in corrections, so please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor, and when we come back, we have a great discussion ahead.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description.
And we are back. Hey, Soto, I've seen this a few times in my career. Now, I'm sure there's going to be many other times where this can happen. But two that come right to the top of my head is implementing programming in close custody units because of just the timing of the programming, but what needs to be done before the inmate is placed into the programming. And then also, I've also seen housing units, regular housing units, house inmates that are like close custody inmates. And what I mean by that, like you have to check on their cell every 15 minutes. And sometimes it's tough when those inmates are in a regular housing area because a lot of stuff can happen along the way that can stop someone from being able to do that every 15 minutes. And that's not because they don't want to, it's just because there's so much going on in the unit that they may not be able to get back to that inmate within 15 minutes. I believe also in county jails, there's some places where, I know in Indiana I saw it, where the intake was actually a holding area, and the officer that was doing the intake was also responsible for doing the 15-minute checks on inmates that had concerns that had to be, looked after every 15 minutes. So they would be caught up intaking an inmate and then get sidetracked. And I was like, oh my God, wait a second, and then have to run over to go check the inmate that they're supposed to be watching every 15 minutes. But again, it's only because they had one officer there. For me, I would be asking for backup because you can't devote 100% effectiveness on both things at once. But could you think of any similar situations?
You know what? Those are perfect and great examples because I definitely have gone through the same examples. And I think the question was, has administration come up with policies that usually they're not thinking it all the way through. That it gives you, as the officer, some guidelines as to how to do your job, but it interferes with the rest of your job, and sometimes you don't have the time to finish all the tasks that now are placed upon you. So those are perfect examples, like the close custody unit. I remember when they were trying to give those close custody inmates more time outside of their cells by doing programming, doing religious services in an environment, controlled, more indoor rec as well as outdoor rec. So when you get into a unit that's pretty large and you have a large amount of residents and you're trying to give them all the time that this new policy is allotting them, it really hinders upon the officer, because now you're trying to get your regular stuff like giving out showers on a daily basis, giving the phone on a daily basis. Now you have the yard to deal with, indoor rec, any programs that are being facilitated, and it's a close custody unit. So you're doing extra work, because every time they come out of their cell, you have to do some security measures, whether it be strip searching, making sure they're, some places you have to escort them. You have to have 2 officers able to escort them from place to place. All that takes time. So by inputting these policies without looking at all of them through, you know what's going to happen. Officers are going to take some shortcuts trying to get everything done. And shortcuts, you know what's going to happen when they take shortcuts.
Yeah, I mean, shortcuts, I'll be honest with you, starts to develop into complacency, because now we're operating on convenience as opposed to what really needs to be done. We've done shows on that before where, let's say you're running late for mess, and instead of sending out 20 just to catch up, you send out 30 or 40. Eventually, because it's done quicker, that becomes the norm. Now we're sending out 40 every day, and we don't realize how far away from policy we have kind of led astray. Now, you know what's funny too, as we talked about the programming and stuff like that, people may not realize that prisons and jails, we operate by the minute. Like at this point, I know it may sound crazy, we can't even lose a minute. I mean, that's how so specific our timing is. And when you were talking about bringing inmates to programming, it's probably going to be, 1 inmate at a time. Literally in a close custody area. That's what I mean. Not in a general population, a close custody area. So you'll find that the program may require that the inmates have to be there for specifically an hour. That's the amount of time they need to be in the class. But the problem is that we may not have that hour. The problem is that we may have a movement. We may have something going on. We may have mess, whatever's in between. So, it could take 20 or 30 minutes to get the inmate into that area. And now you're left with 30 minutes of programming. And I don't think sometimes people from the outside, they may see like, what, we need programming, let's get it done. But they don't have an idea of how the operations is, what could affect that hour, what has to be done in order to get that inmate there, or a group of inmates there, especially in a closed custody unit. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree. And I think that one of the issues that we see when administration's coming up with policy is that sometimes they don't even try it first. Right? So in any other business, you come up with a new policy, you have a test period where you're going to, hey, let's test this out and see if it works. In corrections, unfortunately, over the 25 years that I've been there, every time a new policy comes out, they never come up with a nice test period. And that's kind of like that. You can work out the kinks. The other issue I see is, you're going to come up with a new policy. How about you take the people that do the job every day in and out and get some of their input, right? Bring them into the conversation. Here's what our task is. Here's what our goal is. Here's what we want to do, whether it be more programming in a close custody unit or anything else. And bring the people that do this every day so they can up front tell you what the problems may be in doing that exact thing that you're trying to accomplish. We all have to work together, right? And then, lastly, just to give you another example, maybe in a different environment, you're talking about sometimes we have to put people on like a suicide watch or constant watch, right? People are trying to not only work with time frames, but also work with their budget, saying, hey, I don't have this one-on-one officer to do this with because it's costing me money if I have 3 or 4 or 5 inmates on this constant watch, suicide watch. And then they come up with these ideas. Well, let's put a camera in front of each door and then have the officer monitor the camera with 3 or 4 inmates on that camera. Well, are you truly doing constant watch, or are we cutting corners and now that officer has to watch a screen and go back and forth between 2 to 3 or 4 inmates?
You know, you hit something on the point too. Sometimes it's the budgets, the amount of money that they're willing to put up that could, you know, probably assist if they give us the right amount of money. One of the things I want to mention too is that we definitely don't want to cut corners. We know that. So my concern is that if you feel it's at that point where you're starting to cut corners, you need to bring it up to your higher level. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes management is pushed where do or die. You got to get it done, or, you know, this is what's going to wind up happening to you as a manager. So they put the pressure on the front line. Now, sometimes management, it's sad to say, but they may not be in a position to hear excuses. You know, and I'm not saying, guys, because sometimes people don't realize pressure comes from all levels. It doesn't matter where you're at. There's pressure being applied somewhere. So now this manager is not looking for excuses. They're looking to get the job done, you know, and now that's where safety and security may be put at risk. Because now when you start to see these corners, you know, being cut, even the person that's in charge of overseeing, making sure policy is being implemented, may be the one that wants to cut those corners to get the job done. I mean, yeah, I know you're agreeing with that. Would you?
I am. I'm totally agreeing with your statement. I think part of the question that was posed to us was also, how do you deal with it? How do you fix it? And it's kind of hard sometimes to do so, but let's give you some pointers, all right? So one, obviously you told them you have to talk to your upper echelon, right? Your immediate supervisor, and give them the pointers or say, hey, this is why this is not working. Second thing is, I would document, right? Document what you're doing and how long it's taking you to do exactly each thing or step of the policy and why it's becoming troublesome. I would not cut corners to try to make it work, because what happens is then if you make it work today, you make it work tomorrow. Now administration says, oh, this is great. Policy's in place. It's going smoothly, right? Until one day, you know, you hit that cogwheel, you hit that obstacle, or something happens that throws everything off. And you might have cut a corner that could actually harm somebody. Security has to be paramount. We can't work without it. So giving you some tips on how to deal with it. One is talking to your upper echelon, your immediate supervisors. Two is documenting how long it takes to do each procedure the right way, the way it's spelled out, right? And then three, just pointing out some things that might have been missed in the policy, or might have been missed because someone didn't know. Oh, I forgot. We also have to run yard. We also have to run religious. We also have to run visits. We have to run, you know, any type of program. All that has to be documented. The more you document, the easier it is for administration to then look at it and say, oh, maybe we need to, you know, change this a bit and make this work better.
Yeah, you know, I agree. Don't get stuck in the routine of just putting stuff into the logbook or however you document something because it's routine to do so. Because eventually, if something does happen, like Soto's mentioning, and you know, those logbooks go to higher level individuals, someone's going to eventually say, well, how do you have the time to do all this? Like, you know, literally, like it says that, you know, you've done this every half an hour, plus you have 5 15-minute watches, plus, you know, it takes 20 minutes to bring an inmate over here. How are you getting the programs done on this? So you're right. I mean, that is key. And if you can't do it, to be honest with you, if your supervisor should go on site to try to see if it can. I mean, obviously you want a second opinion of a higher level. You know, so if I'm an officer and, you know, I just can't get this done, before I say, you know, that I can't get it done, let me get a supervisor who's more familiar with the policy to make sure that I'm doing what needs to be done, and just to double check. So now if the supervisor comes in and says, yeah, this is really impossible, that supervisor now also has to support that officer. You know, bring it up together and say, hey, guys, I know you guys want this done. He's been trying or she's been trying, then I got a chance to see it. It's just not feasible. It just can't be done. Now, the wrong thing is if the supervisor comes in and just says, I don't care, make it happen, and then just kind of leave, because now this officer may just wind up lying in the logbook, you know, just because they're more concerned about the perception of it getting done than it actually getting done. And I've seen that happen. I've seen people struggle so much where, Gangi, I just can't do it all. And I'm looking at the logbook and I'm saying, yeah, but you say you are right here. What do you mean? I said, you're making a complaint now that you can't do everything, but for the last couple of days, you've been putting down that you have. You know, so that to me is a problem. You could have addressed it immediately by calling us over and then saying, hey, I just can't do it. And the other thing is too, is sometimes you may have some officers that really want to go above and beyond. And when they can't get the job done, they actually may put it on themselves. They actually may think that they're the ones that are at fault. And that's why it's great for a supervisor to really understand if there's any new changes, to really go check on that officer or check on that staff member to make sure they understand what must be done. And then again, to see if it's reasonable within that time frame. And like you said, if it's not, you got to pass it up and then put the buck on management. But at all times, that documentation will hold weight, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we're doing what we call sometimes audits, right? When we come and audit an entire institution or audit our own little world, our little unit, all that matters. Sometimes we write policies, and I'm going to talk as if I was administration. Sometimes we write ourselves into non-compliance, meaning we put ourselves so many rules or so many policies that there's no possible way of completing every single one. So we kind of write ourselves into compliance, right? Because I wrote a policy last year that's still, reviewed every year, but this year I added to that. And then the following year we're adding to that. Now we have all these policies in place that sometimes contradict each other. And sometimes we got to remind ourselves, bring ourselves back and say, hey, we're pretty much writing ourselves into compliance. Another thing that I've seen, officers do, and I don't agree with it, right? It's go to those extreme measures, right? Where something in a policy doesn't work and it seems like nobody's listening to them. They kind of do their work kind of stoppage or work slowdown, where it takes they do it on purpose, right? Now they're not doing their duties as effectively as they should be done because they're trying to prove a point. But sometimes what does that do as far as administration? It kind of turns us off because now we're saying, well, now they're just doing it on purpose. So you have to be careful when you do things that way too.
Yeah, especially when the policy involves two different departments, because or more than one department, because we want to show a trust between all departments. So like, again, let's talk about programming. If programming has to be implemented in a close custody unit, I would like to believe that my officers are doing the best that they can to implement that programming. And then when you find out that programs are being canceled, whatever it is, then you go back and say, let me go see what's happening. I feel that my officers are trying, but let's see what's happening. Then when you go there and you just see some simple 101 stuff that's not happening, but even worse, when you go there with the program supervisor and they recognize things. Like, these aren't advanced concerns here. They're recognizing things that are just showing that the effort is not being done. That to me is like, okay, guys, this isn't going to work. This is obviously something that, there's a conflict here, but it's nothing to do with the job. This is more of a, I don't want to do it, as opposed to, let's work together, let's get the job done, because everybody has a level of responsibility. But I like what you said about the policies. Administration is usually, there's a team of us, don't get me wrong, but most of the time it's one of us really writing those policies. And we have so much that we oversee that sometimes we have to make sure that when we write something, it doesn't affect the other departments. See, that's one of the things when you're in administration, is that you're going to write things that involve multiple departments. So you may have this flow and all of a sudden you're piling on things, and maybe there's this one department that's at the bottom. You're like, wait a second, Gans, everything was going smooth, but you totally forgot about us. You totally forgot that mental health needs offices in that, or needs appointments in that area for programming or whatever it is. So you're right. It's a lot to keep track of, but if you do, like you said at the beginning, go right to that front line and you have everybody there that could possibly be affected by whatever policy it is that you're created, the magic will happen, because they will sit there, they're involved, they're implementing it, they want it to work because they're behind it, and they will do it above and beyond to make sure it works. But for the officer here or the supervisor here that's going through that limited time, I think the only thing you can really do is just document every time it doesn't get done, notify your supervisors, and then eventually, God forbid, if something does happen, at least you covered yourself. I mean, that's what it is, right, Soto? Just a CYA move?
Yeah, you have to do that because, at the end of it all, administration's trying to accomplish a goal. You're trying to do the work, but we can't cut corners. One last thing that, we have some departments that are unionized, and they have a union that represents the officers, the supervisors, and everybody above. One of your last resorts is you can go to the union as well and have them represent you. If you yourself can't, don't want to, put yourself out there, you can ask for a union representative to say, hey, you want to take a look at this, maybe you guys can approach administration from your angle as well. So that way we can get this accomplished the right way. Sometimes, you know, it helps to have that. I know some places don't have unions to represent them, but, you know, they can be a liaison on the shift. You know that most some supervisors listen to some officers more than others because they believe they have more experience, seniority. Go through those avenues to try to get your point across about the policy maybe not being, you know, truly and effective the way it's written.
Right, and the sad thing is, before we come to a close, I want people to realize that this shouldn't even, like, yes, Frontline implements it, but that's at a trial period. We want them to implement it and then kick back, like Lewis said, like, these are what the concerns are, not like, oh, we're going to kick it off to the front line. They have to get it done regardless. No, we need the feedback. So technically, everything we're talking about, conflict of time and practice, is literally starts from above. You know, they have to be willing to recognize it, or if they don't see it yet, give it a chance to see if there is a concern. And then if there is, go back and revamp. But ultimately, if you have someone that's running amok on the front line, it's really a higher level management that really has to make the fix. And if they don't, that's where you have that divide where Frontline's going to come back and say, you know what, I tried, tell you what the concerns are. Now you've put me in a position where I'm going to have to write this because I can't do my job. But if you continue to say you're doing it, when something goes wrong, because management may not question how it's being done if it's running smoothly, but if there's a flaw and they go to look back and say, wow, you know, they weren't doing this properly the whole time, they don't care about the time. They're going to come at you. So cover your own ass, play the game, and let them know this is what that concern is. Hey, Soto, anything you want to say in closing?
I just want to tell the staff, you know, this is a great question. So if you have questions like these, please forward it to Tier Talk. We'll definitely take a look at them and try to answer them the best way we can. Please, by all means, do not cut corners. Do not do that, right? It's all about safety first. We want to go home the same way we went in, with our health and with our partners and our comrades in one piece. So please, just document, and use the tools available to get your point across.
Yeah, I think we actually found a Saturday routine because when my girls are out tumbling, you know, we could do a Saturday morning show around the same time. And then I figure Russ will be maybe Thursday and then maybe Tuesday with Connie. And then we have a set schedule. So that works for me instead of just randomly just putting up videos. People can get some level of consistency, but we'll see how long that consistency lasts. I'm consistent for about 2 weeks. All right, guys, as always, the show is tiered up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. Stay safe.